Today, you're getting 5 insane family karma stories that will leave your jaw on the floor. Rich families who humiliated, disowned, and laughed at the broke loser until they found out he secretly controlled everything. Stay until the end, because number 5 is the most brutal one we've ever told. Let's dive in.
The crystal flute shattered against the floor, but nobody looked down. All eyes were on Gavin's hand, which was resting possessively on the small of my wife's back. Oops, Gavin laughed, the sound wet and dismissive. He didn't look at the mess. He looked at me. Clean that up, would you, David? You're good at cleaning up messes. It's about the only thing you are good at. The corporate gala was in full swing. The ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton smelled of roasted duck, expensive perfume, and the distinct, metallic scent of corporate fear. But right here, in this circle, it smelled like betrayal. Monica didn't flinch. She stood next to my manager, looking radiant in a red dress I had paid for, sipping champagne I had bought, smiling at a man who was actively humiliating her husband. "David, don't just stand there," Monica whispered, her voice tight with embarrassment. "Gavin is joking. Just, go get a waiter. Don't make a scene." "I'm not making a scene, Monica," I said, my voice steady. "I'm just waiting for Gavin to remove his hand." Gavin smirked. He was a tall man, handsome in a conventional, polished way, with the kind of teeth that looked like they cost more than my annual salary, or at least, the salary he thought I earned. "Relax, Dave," Gavin said, squeezing Monica's waist. "We're all family here at Next Logistics, aren't we? Monica was just telling me how stressed you've been lately. How stagnant your career is." He leaned in closer, his cologne, a pungent musk, invading my personal space. "She's worried about your future. And frankly, so am I. The quarterly reviews are coming up next week. And let's just say, the numbers don't look good for the legacy employees." Legacy employees. That was Gavin's code for anyone over 30 who didn't laugh at his jokes. "Is that so?" I asked. I thought my efficiency reports were the highest in the department. "Efficiency isn't everything, Dave. It's about culture fit," Gavin said, winking at Monica. "And Monica fits the culture perfectly. She's ambitious. Fire. You're just smoke. And smoke gets cleared out." Monica touched his arm, giggling. A sound that used to be reserved for me. "Oh, stop it, Gavin. You're terrible." "But David, he has a point. You've been an analyst for 5 years. Gavin is a regional director. Maybe you should listen to him instead of fighting him." I looked at my wife. Really looked at her. I saw the calculation in her eyes. She wasn't just flirting, she was networking. She was betting on a new horse because she thought the old one was ready for the glue factory. "I'll keep that in mind," I said. I turned and walked away toward the bar. I needed distance. Not because I was sad, but because if I stayed there one more second, I might have revealed my hand too early. And poker is played until the river card is dealt. I ordered a sparkling water with lime. The bartender, an older man who had worked these events for years, gave me a sympathetic nod. He had seen it all. I took a sip and surveyed the room. Nobody here knew the truth. To them, I was David Mercer, senior data analyst, salary $65,000 a year. A quiet guy who drove a Honda Accord and brown-bagged his lunch. They didn't know that Next Logistics was just one subsidiary of Mercer Holdings. They didn't know that I had founded the parent company 12 years ago, sold my first tech startup for 9 figures, and bought this logistics chain 6 months ago because I saw potential in its infrastructure. I had placed myself in the analyst role undercover. I wanted to see why this specific branch was bleeding money despite high revenue. I found the leak 3 months ago. His name was Gavin Thorne. He was embezzling via vendor kickbacks. I had the data. I had the emails. I had everything. I was just waiting for the external audit to finalize the paper trail before I dropped the hammer. But I never expected my wife to be part of the collateral damage. I watched them across the room. They were dancing now. Slow. Too close. Gavin whispered something in her ear, and she threw her head back, laughing. Then, she rested her head on his shoulder. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Monica. Going to head home early. Migraine. Don't wait up. I looked up. She wasn't heading to the exit. She and Gavin were heading toward the elevators that led to the hotel suites. The rage finally hit me. It wasn't the hot, explosive rage of a jealous husband. It was the cold, clinical rage of a CEO who just realized he had a liability on the board. I finished my drink and walked over to the elevators. I didn't get in with them. I watched the numbers climb. They stopped on the 12th floor. The executive suites. I waited 5 minutes. Then I took the next car up. I walked down the hallway. I didn't need to guess the room. Gavin always booked Suite 1204 on the company card. I knew this because I approved the expense reports he thought were being auto-approved by a computer algorithm. I stood outside the door. I could hear music. Laughter. I didn't knock. I pulled out my master keycard, the one only the hotel manager and the owner of the corporate account possessed. The light turned green. I pushed the door open. They weren't in bed. Not yet. They were in the living area of the suite. Champagne was open. Monica was sitting on the sofa, her shoes off, holding a glass. Gavin was pacing, jacket off, tie loosened, looking like the king of the world. And once the audit is done next week, Gavin was saying, I'm going to fire half the department. Starting with your husband. It's a mercy killing, really. He's dragging you down, babe. With the bonus I'm getting, we can get that condo in Miami. Miami sounds perfect, Monica sighed. I'm so tired of the suburbs. David is just so small. He thinks small. Surprise, I said. Both of them jumped. Gavin spilled his drink on the carpet. Monica dropped hers, another shattered glass. David. Monica screamed, pulling her shawl around her shoulders as if she were naked. What the hell are you doing here? Are you stalking me? Gavin's face turned red, then purple. He marched toward me, pointing a finger in my face. You little creep. You broke into my room. That's it. You're done. You are fired. Get out of here before I call security and have you thrown in jail for trespassing. I didn't move. I didn't blink. You're going to fire me, Gavin? I asked, my voice calm, filling the room. On what grounds? Insubordination. Gavin roared. Harassment. Stupidity. Take your pick. You're a bug, Mercer. I can squash you whenever I want. I run this company. You run this company? I repeated. Damn right I do. The owners are some faceless board in New York who don't care as long as the numbers are green. I am the authority here. And I am telling you to get out. Monica stood up, her eyes pleading, not for me, but for the situation to end so she could save face. David, please, she hissed. Just go. We'll talk about a divorce in the morning. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Gavin is the man I love. He can give me the life I deserve. He certainly can, I said. A life of unemployment and legal battles. Gavin laughed. Unemployment? Buddy, I just signed a 5-year contract extension. I'm untouchable. I reached into my inner jacket pocket. Gavin flinched, perhaps thinking I had a weapon. I pulled out a single, folded piece of paper. It wasn't a weapon. It was worse. Actually, Gavin, I said, unfolding the document. You didn't sign a contract extension. You signed a letter of intent, which is subject to the approval of the majority shareholder. So what? Gavin sneered. Like the owner knows who you are. The owner knows exactly who I am, I said. And he knows exactly who you are. I walked over to the minibar, poured myself a drink, and sat down in the armchair opposite them. Monica, I said, looking at my wife. You said I think small. You said I'm stagnant. You are. She cried. You've been an analyst for 5 years. No, I said. I've been playing an analyst for 5 years. Because I wanted to know if the people working for me were honest. And I wanted to know if the woman I married loved me for me, or for the lifestyle I could provide. I took a sip of the bourbon. I got my answer on both counts tonight. Gavin looked confused. The arrogance was wavering, replaced by a creeping unease. What are you talking about? Playing. Gavin, I said, looking him dead in the eye. Who signs your paychecks? The CFO, Mr. Henderson, Gavin said automatically. And who authorizes Mr. Henderson to release the funds? The chairman. Correct, I said. And have you ever met the chairman? Mr. D. Mercer. Gavin froze. No. Nobody has. He's a recluse. A. D. Mercer, I said slowly. Alex David Mercer. I reached into my wallet and threw my black titanium ID card onto the coffee table. It wasn't an employee badge. It was the ownership access card. Hello, Gavin. I believe you're sitting in my suite. Gavin stared at the black titanium card on the table. For a second, the room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the mini fridge. Then, he let out a laugh. It was a nervous, cracking sound, but he forced it into a sneer. Nice prop, Dave, Gavin scoffed, kicking the table leg. What did you do? Print that at Kinko's? You really expect me to believe that the guy who drives a 6-year-old Honda and eats tuna sandwiches is the chairman of a billion-dollar holding group? You're delusional. You're having a psychotic break. He turned to Monica, gesturing wildly. See? I told you he was weird. He snapped. Monica, call security. Tell them your ex-husband is threatening us. Monica looked at the card, then at me. She knew me. She knew I didn't play pranks. And she noticed something Gavin missed, the engraving on the card wasn't printed. It was laser-etched. Gavin, she whispered, her voice trembling. David doesn't lie. Shut up, Monica. Gavin shouted. He's a loser. And now he's a trespasser. He grabbed the room phone. I'm ending this charade right now. I'm calling the general manager. I'll have him thrown out on the street. Go ahead, I said, leaning back and crossing my legs. Dial 0. Ask for Mr. Sterling. Tell him there's a guest in suite 1204 who claims to be the owner. See what he says. Gavin ripped the receiver off the cradle. He punched the button aggressively, glaring at me the whole time. Yes. This is Gavin Thorne, Regional Director of Next Logistics. I have an intruder in my suite claiming to be, yeah. Yeah, send someone up now. He paused. His face twitched. What? He asked. The arrogance began to leak out of his voice. Yes, I'm looking at him. He's, average height, brown hair. Gavin listened for another 10 seconds. The color started to drain from his face, starting at his forehead and washing down to his neck until he looked like a sheet of paper. Are you sure? Gavin squeaked. He slowly lowered the phone, but he didn't hang up. The receiver dangled from his hand by the cord, swinging back and forth like a pendulum counting down his career. What did he say, Gavin? I asked pleasantly. Gavin looked at Monica, his eyes wide with terror. He Mr. Sterling said that Mr. Mercer is currently in the building. He said he authorized the keycard entry 2 minutes ago. He said he's coming up with the security detail to escort the unauthorized personnel out. Unauthorized personnel, I repeated. That would be you. Monica let out a strangled gasp. She looked at me, her eyes scanning my face as if seeing a stranger. The man she had called stagnant was suddenly the most powerful person in her world. David, she breathed, taking a step toward me. Is it true? All of it? The startup? The holding company? Yes, Monica, I said. I sold Vortex Tech for $200 million before we even met. I put it in a trust. I wanted to build something real with you. I wanted to know you loved me, not the bank account. I do love you. She cried, tears instantly springing to her eyes. She rushed over, kneeling beside my chair, grabbing my hand. David, please. You have to understand. I was lonely. Gavin manipulated me. He told me you were going to be fired. I was just trying to protect our future. I looked down at her. It was pathetic. You weren't protecting our future, Monica. You were securing your exit strategy. I pulled my hand away. And Gavin, I said, turning to the man who was now leaning against the wall for support. Since we're clearing the air, let's talk about your future. David, wait, Gavin stammered, holding up his hands. Mr. Mercer. Sir. Look, it's a personal matter, right? We can keep this professional. I'm your top earner. The numbers don't lie. You need me. You're right. Numbers don't lie, I said. But people do. I reached for the folder I had placed on the table next to the ID card. You mentioned earlier that you were getting a big bonus next week, I said, opening the file. I assume you were referring to the vendor optimization kickoff. Gavin stopped breathing. How do you know about that? Because I'm the analyst who flagged the discrepancies, Gavin. Remember the boring spreadsheets you told me to ignore? I didn't ignore them. I traced them. I pulled out a spreadsheet with highlighted rows. You set up a shell company called GT Logistics. You've been approving invoices for shipping containers that don't exist. You're billing us for phantom freight and pocketing the difference. $300,000 in the last 18 months. Gavin's knees gave out. He literally slid down the wall until he was sitting on the floor. That's an accounting error, he whispered weakly. No, I said. That's embezzlement. That's grand larceny. And that's a federal crime because the wires crossed state lines. Monica scrambled back from Gavin as if he were radioactive. You stole from the company. Gavin. You told me you earned that money. You bought me earrings with stolen money. Oh, stop the act, Monica, I snapped. You didn't care where the money came from as long as it sparkled. A heavy knock pounded on the door. Housekeeping? Gavin asked, a sliver of delirious hope in his voice. No, I said, checking my watch. That would be the police. I filed the report an hour ago. I just wanted to see the look on your face before they read you your rights. The door opened. Mr. Sterling, the hotel manager, walked in, looking grave. Behind him were 2 uniformed police officers and the head of Next Logistics Legal, a woman named Sarah who looked ready to kill. Mr. Mercer, Sterling said, bowing his head to me. I apologize for the disturbance in your suite. We have the authorities here as requested. I stood up and buttoned my jacket. Thank you, Sterling, I said. I pointed at Gavin, who was now weeping silently on the floor. That's the man. He has unauthorized company property on his laptop. Seize it. Sarah stepped forward. Gavin Thorne, you are hereby terminated for cause, effective immediately. Your stock options are voided. We are pressing full charges. One of the officers pulled Gavin up. He didn't fight. He looked like a man who had just watched his entire life burn down in under 5 minutes. David. Gavin sobbed as they cuffed him. Mercer. Please. I have a mortgage. I have kids. You should have thought about them before you stole from me, I said coldly. And before you slept with my wife. They dragged him out. The door closed, leaving only me, the hotel manager, and Monica in the room. Monica stood in the center of the ruin, clutching her shawl. She looked at the door where her rich boyfriend had just been hauled away, then she looked at me, the actual billionaire she had betrayed. She licked her lips. She fixed her hair. She put on the smile that had fooled me for 5 years. David, she whispered, stepping closer, her voice dropping to that sultry tone she used when she wanted something. He's gone. It's over. We can fix this. You hid who you were, so we both have secrets, right? Let's just go home. To your real home. We can start fresh. I looked at her. Sterling, I said to the hotel manager. Yes, sir. Is the penthouse available? Monica's eyes lit up. Oh, David, the penthouse. Tonight? Just us. Yes, the penthouse is available, Mr. Mercer, Sterling said. Good, I said. Have my things moved there immediately. I turned to Monica. As for you. I looked at Monica. She was beaming, her eyes already glazing over with visions of marble floors and room service. She thought she had survived the crash. She thought she was the cargo I would salvage. As for you, I continued, my voice devoid of warmth. You misunderstood, Monica. I said my things are being moved to the penthouse. Her smile faltered, twitching at the corners. But we're married. Your things are my things. Where you go, I go. That's the vow, remember? For better or worse. You voided that vow the moment you walked into this room with Gavin, I said. And you certainly didn't care about worse when you were planning to divorce me for being an analyst. I turned to Mr. Sterling. Sterling, this woman is not a guest of the hotel. She is not listed on the reservation for the penthouse. And as of 5 minutes ago, the corporate card used to book this suite has been cancelled. Sterling nodded, his face a mask of professional indifference. Understood, Mr. Mercer. That means this room is currently unpaid. Monica's face went pale. What? No, Gavin paid for it. Or the company. The company doesn't pay for adultery, Monica, I said, setting my glass down. And since Gavin is currently in the back of a squad car, I doubt he's settling the bill. I checked my watch. The rate for the executive suite is $1,200 a night. Plus the champagne. Plus the broken glass. I buttoned my jacket and walked toward the door. David. She screamed, rushing to block my path. She grabbed my lapels, her perfume, once my favorite scent, now smelling cloying and cheap. You can't leave me here. I don't have that kind of money. You know I don't. I spent my paycheck on this dress. Then you should have kept the receipt, I said, gently but firmly removing her hands from my suit. Because you're not getting a refund on your choices. I'll sue you. She shrieked, her mask finally slipping, revealing the ugliness underneath. I'll take half. I know you have millions. I'll hire the best lawyer in the city and I'll bleed you dry. I stopped. I leaned in close, so close I could see the smudged mascara on her cheek. You can try, Monica. But you're forgetting something. The trust one put my money in. It was established before the marriage. It's ironclad. You get what you came into this marriage with. I looked her up and down. Which, if I recall, was a leased Honda and student debt. I stepped around her. Mr. Sterling, I said. Escort her out. If she refuses to pay the bill, add it to her credit report. I hear she's worried about her future. She should be. David. David. I walked down the hallway. Her screams followed me, echoing off the tasteful wallpaper, desperate and shrill. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the penthouse. As the doors slid shut, cutting off the sound of her voice, I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel lonely. I felt light. The boardroom at Mercer Holdings was quiet. The glass walls offered a panoramic view of the skyline, the city I had helped build, the city I now owned a significant piece of. I sat at the head of the table. No more undercover analyst work. No more tuna sandwiches in the break room. I wore a bespoke suit, and my name was on the door. Sarah, my chief legal officer, slid a file across the mahogany table. The Gavin Thorne verdict came in this morning, she said. I opened the file. Guilty on all counts. Wire fraud, embezzlement, corporate espionage. Sentence? I asked. 5 years in federal prison. Restitution ordered, but he has no assets. We seized the house, the car, even his 401k. He's bankrupt. Good, I said, closing the file. And the divorce? Finalized yesterday, Sarah said, a small, satisfied smile playing on her lips. She contested the premarital trust, just like you predicted. The judge threw it out. She walked away with her personal effects and a bill for your legal fees. I stood up and walked to the window. It was raining outside. A cold, gray drizzle. I looked down at the street, 40 stories below. The people looked like ants. Do you know where she is? I asked. I didn't care, really. But curiosity is a stubborn reflex. Last I heard, Sarah said, standing up to leave, she moved back in with her parents. She's working as a shift manager at a retail store in the mall. Selling handbags she can no longer afford. I nodded. I remembered the night at the gala. You're smoke, Gavin had said. And smoke gets cleared out. He was wrong. I wasn't smoke. I was the fire. They were just the wood that had to burn to keep me warm. I turned back to the empty room. My phone buzzed. It was a text from a woman I had met at a charity auction last week. She was a pediatric surgeon. She drove a 10-year-old Volvo and didn't know who Mercer Holdings was. Dinner tonight? I know a great hole-in-the-wall for tacos. I smiled. I love tacos, I typed back. I grabbed my jacket and walked out of the office. The legacy employee was gone. The chairman had work to do. And for the first time in years, the numbers finally added up.
Next story in 3, 2, 1.
The sound of the zipper tearing shut on the suitcase was loud in the quiet bedroom. It sounded like a fabric scream. I stood by the door, holding a cup of lukewarm coffee, watching my wife of 7 years pack her life into 2 Louis Vuitton bags I had bought her for our anniversary last month. Don't look at me like that, Ethan, Jessica said, not breaking her rhythm. She was folding silk blouses with a precision she never applied to our marriage. This isn't sudden. You know it isn't. We've been existing. Not living. Existing? I asked. My voice was calm, almost detached. It was a defense mechanism I had perfected over years of high-stakes boardroom negotiations. We live in a 4-bedroom house in the suburbs. You drive a Range Rover. We take vacations twice a year. Most people would call that living. That's exactly the problem, she snapped, finally looking at me. Her eyes were cold, hard flint. It's suburban. It's predictable. You come home at 6 p.m. You talk about supply chains and market stability. It's boring, Ethan. You are boring. She walked to the vanity and swept her jewelry into a travel pouch. I need fire, she continued, her voice softening as she looked at her reflection. I need someone who takes risks. Someone who commands a room. Someone who doesn't just manage money, but makes it happen. A car horn honked outside. It was an aggressive, rhythmic honk. Jessica's face lit up. It was a look I hadn't seen directed at me in years. It was excitement. Adrenaline. That's him, she said, zipping the last bag. The guy who commands the room, I said. She grabbed the handles. His name is Julian. And yes, he does. He's a regional director, Ethan. He just closed a massive deal. He drives a Maserati. He's taking me to Paris next week. First class. I moved aside to let her pass. I could have stopped her. I could have begged. But I knew something she didn't. I knew the name Julian. I followed her downstairs. The front door was open, letting in the humid evening air. Parked in my driveway, blocking my modest Lexus SUV, was indeed a Maserati Ghibli. It was bright blue. Loud. Obnoxious. Leaning against it was a man who looked like he had been manufactured in a factory that produced arrogance. He wore a suit that was too tight, a watch that was too big, and a smile that was too wide. Hey, beautiful. Julian shouted, ignoring me completely. Ready to blow this popsicle stand? Jessica practically ran to him. He kissed her, a performative, possessive kiss, his hand sliding low on her back while he made eye contact with me. He wanted me to see it. He wanted to mark his territory. You must be the ex, Julian said, breaking the kiss and looking me up and down. He smirked at my polo shirt and jeans. Ethan, right? Accountant? Middle management? Something like that, I said. Julian laughed. It was a bark of a laugh. Yeah, I can tell. Look, no hard feelings, buddy. Some guys are built for the grind, and some are built for the glory. Jess here, she needs the glory. He popped the trunk of the Maserati. I noticed a small sticker on the bumper. Apex Fleet Leasing. Nice car, I said. Yeah, it's a beast, Julian bragged, tossing Jessica's delicate bags into the back with careless force. Just picked it up. Company perk. When you bring in the revenue I do, the company treats you like royalty. Which company is that? I asked, leaning against the doorframe. Apex Global, Julian said, puffing out his chest. I'm the new senior director of North American sales. Just got the promotion letter yesterday. Huge sign-on bonus. Stock options. The works. My heart didn't skip a beat. It actually slowed down. Apex Global. Apex, I repeated. They're in logistics, aren't they? Logistics, tech, infrastructure, we do it all, Julian said, talking about the company as if he had built it himself. We're about to merge with a massive conglomerate tomorrow. I'm actually meeting the owner, the ghost, they call him, in the morning. Rumor has it he's handing out executive equity packages. I'm going to be a millionaire by noon. Jessica looked at him with pure adoration. See, Ethan? That's ambition. Julian is going to be sitting at the head of the table. Is he? I asked. You wouldn't understand, Jessica said, shaking her head with pity. You're happy with your 401k and your safe little life. Julian is a shark. Julian slammed the trunk shut. He walked around to the driver's side, revving the engine before he even fully sat down. The exhaust roared, shaking the quiet suburban street. Don't wait up, pal. Julian yelled over the noise. We're celebrating tonight. Champagne is on me, well, on the company card. He laughed again, put the car in gear, and peeled out of my driveway, leaving tire marks on the asphalt I had resealed last summer. I watched them disappear around the corner. The silence returned to the house, but it felt different now. It didn't feel empty. It felt clear. I walked back inside and locked the door. I went to the kitchen and poured the lukewarm coffee down the sink. Then, I opened the fridge and took out a bottle of sparkling water. I walked into my home office. It was a small room, unassuming. A simple desk, a laptop, and a shredder. To Jessica, this was where I did boring spreadsheets. I sat down and opened the laptop. I scanned my fingerprint. The screen came to life, displaying the logo of a company, Omnicorp. Underneath the logo were the subsidiaries. A long list of companies owned by the parent holding group. Third on the list was Apex Global. I clicked on the HR and payroll portal. I typed in a name, Julian Vane. His profile popped up. Position, Regional Sales Manager, probationary. Status, active. Salary, commission-based. Notes, pending disciplinary review for unauthorized expense account usage. I looked at the disciplinary review tab. Apparently, the company card Julian was using to buy champagne tonight had been flagged 3 times this month for non-business expenses. Then I looked at his schedule for tomorrow. 9 a.m. All hands executive meeting. Presentation by the chairman of Omnicorp. I leaned back in my chair. Jessica was right about one thing. Julian was going to meet the man who made it happen. She just didn't realize that man had been sleeping in her bed for 7 years. I wasn't an accountant. I was the majority shareholder and chairman of Omnicorp. I had kept my identity hidden from the lower-level subsidiaries to maintain objectivity and, frankly, to avoid people like Julian sucking up to me. I lived quietly because I hated the noise of wealth. Jessica hated the quiet. Now, she was going to get all the noise she could handle. I picked up my phone and dialed my chief of staff. Mr. Sterling. Her voice was crisp, immediate. Sarah, I said. The meeting with the Apex sales team tomorrow morning. Is Julian Vane on the attendee list? Yes, sir. He's listed as a presenter. He's supposed to pitch the Q3 strategy. Good, I said. Make sure he has a front row seat. And Sarah? Yes, sir. Prepare the termination paperwork. But bring it to the meeting blank. I want to fill in the cause personally. Understood. Shall I send a car for you in the morning? No, I said, looking at the empty spot in the driveway where the Maserati had been. I'll drive the vintage Aston Martin tomorrow. I think it's time to stop being boring. I hung up. I walked to the closet in the guest room, the one Jessica never opened because she thought it was just old coats. I pushed aside the winter jackets and unlocked the biometric safe in the back. Inside hung my bespoke suits. The ones that cost more than Julian's entire wardrobe. I pulled out a navy blue suit with a subtle pinstripe, a white shirt with French cuffs, and a pair of solid gold cufflinks. I ran my thumb over the gold. Tomorrow, the shark was going to discover that he was swimming in a tank. And the owner of the tank was hungry. The Aston Martin DB5 purred as I pulled up to the glass and steel monolith that was the Apex Global headquarters. It was a vintage machine, silver birch, radiating a kind of class that a neon blue Maserati could never achieve. The valet, a young man named Leo who had worked there for 2 years, dropped his clipboard when he saw the car. He didn't know it was me at first. He just knew that whoever was driving this car owned the pavement. I stepped out. The Italian wool of my suit caught the morning light. I adjusted my cuffs, feeling the weight of the gold links. Good morning, sir, Leo stammered, rushing over. I don't have a reservation for a DB5, but I can make space in the VIP lot. Keep it out front, Leo, I said, handing him $100 bill. I won't be staying long. Just long enough to take out the trash. Leo looked at my face. His eyes went wide. He recognized me from the company intranet, the picture that only appeared on the Omnicorp holding page, the one titled Chairman E. Sterling. Mr. Sterling? He whispered. I didn't know. I mean, welcome back, sir. Quietly, Leo, I said, putting a finger to my lips. I walked into the lobby. It was cavernous, designed to impress. And sitting on a leather sofa near the security turnstiles was Jessica. She was scrolling on her phone, looking bored but expensive. She wore sunglasses indoors. She didn't see me. She was too busy typing, probably bragging to her friends about how she was currently sitting in the lobby of a billion-dollar company waiting for her executive boyfriend. I bypassed the reception desk. The security guard saw the black keycard in my hand, the master key, and immediately straightened up, nodding respectfully as I swiped through the private executive turnstile. The elevator ride to the 40th floor was silent and swift. My reflection in the polished metal doors stared back at me. No more polo shirts. No more apologetic smiles. This was the face of the man who signed the checks. When the doors opened, Sarah, my chief of staff, was waiting. She held a black leather folder. They're all in boardroom A, sir, she said, falling into step beside me. Mr. Vane has been speaking for 10 minutes. He brought a guest. A guest? I asked, not breaking stride. Yes, sir. He insisted that his partner be allowed to sit in the observation deck. He said he wanted her to witness his ascension. I almost laughed. Perfect. We reached the double mahogany doors of the boardroom. I could hear Julian's voice booming from inside. And that, gentlemen, is why we need to cut the overhead on the logistics team. They're dead weight. Just numbers on a spreadsheet. We need aggressive sales. We need hunters, like me. I nodded to Sarah. She pushed the doors open. The room froze. 20 heads turned. At the far end of the long granite table stood Julian. He was mid-gesture, pointing at a projection screen that showed a graph going up. He looked annoyed at the interruption. Excuse me. Julian barked, not looking at who had entered. I am in the middle of a crucial strategy pitch. You can't just waltz in here and... He turned. The words died in his throat. It sounded like he had swallowed a golf ball. I walked into the room. I didn't rush. I walked with the slow, deliberate pace of a man inspecting his property. The other executives, the CEO, the CFO, the VP of operations, all stood up immediately. Chairs scraped against the floor as they rushed to show respect. Mr. Sterling, the CEO, a gray-haired man named Robert, said, bowing his head slightly. We weren't expecting you until the closing remarks. I decided to come early, Robert, I said, my voice projecting clearly without shouting. I heard there was a presentation about cutting dead weight. I'm very interested in that subject. I walked to the head of the table. Robert scrambled to move his chair out of the way, offering me the seat of power. I sat down. I placed the black folder on the table. Finally, I looked at Julian. He was pale. His mouth was open, but no sound was coming out. He looked from me to the CEO, then back to me, trying to process the glitch in his reality. The boring husband was sitting in the chairman's chair. The accountant was being served water by the CEO. You. Julian whispered. Ethan. What are you doing here? How did you get past security? The room went deathly silent. The other executives looked at Julian with horror. Mr. Vane, Robert hissed. Address the chairman with respect. Chairman. Julian let out a nervous, high-pitched laugh. Robert, come on. This is Ethan. He's my girlfriend's ex-husband. He's an accountant. He probably snuck in to beg for his wife back. Julian looked at me, regaining a sliver of his arrogance. Listen, buddy, this is embarrassing. I know you're hurting, but you can't just crash a board meeting. Security. He waved at the door. No one moved. I leaned forward, clasping my hands. Julian, I said softly. Do you know who owns Apex Global? Omnicorp, Julian said, confused. Everyone knows that. And do you know who owns Omnicorp? Some ghost. Some billionaire recluse. Hello, Julian, I said. I'm the ghost. Julian blinked. No. No, that's impossible. You drive a Lexus. I drive a Lexus because I don't feel the need to compensate for anything, I said. Unlike some people who lease Maseratis on a company card that just got declined. Julian's eyes widened. What? Sarah, I said. Sarah stepped forward and tapped her tablet. The projection screen changed. Gone was Julian's sales graph. In its place was a detailed list of credit card transactions. Club Velvet, $2,400. Maserati lease down payment, $5,000. Louis Vuitton, $3,200. First class tickets to Paris, $8,600. This is the corporate American Express issued to the regional sales office, I explained to the room. It is intended for client dinners and travel. It is not intended to fund your affair with my wife. I looked toward the side of the room. There was a glass wall, soundproof but transparent, separating the boardroom from the observation deck. Jessica was standing there. She was pressed against the glass. She couldn't hear us, but she could see the screen. She could see the list of charges. And she could see me sitting at the head of the table while her shark stood there sweating through his cheap suit. She looked terrified. Now, Julian, I continued, opening the black folder. You mentioned earlier that you were the new senior director. That you had a promotion letter. Julian swallowed hard. He was shaking now. I was told, it was verbal. Robert said. Robert? I looked at the CEO. I never said that, sir, Robert said quickly. Mr. Vane is on probation. His numbers are inflated. We were actually discussing his termination next week. I looked back at Julian. So, you lied to Jessica, I said. You told her you were a director. You told her you were rich. You told her you were taking her to Paris. I picked up a pen. A heavy, gold fountain pen. But you can't take her to Paris, Julian. Because you can't afford the ticket. Ethan, please, Julian stammered, his hands held up in surrender. It was, look, man, it was just a game. I didn't know who you were. If I knew you were the boss, I never would have touched her. I swear. Oh, I believe you, I said coldly. You're not a shark, Julian. You're a scavenger. You only take what you think is unguarded. I wrote a single word on the document inside the folder. Terminated. But here is the problem, I said, standing up. You stole company funds. That's not just a firing offense. That's a felony. I pressed a button on the intercom console. Send them in. The doors opened again. But this time, it wasn't tea and coffee. 2 police officers walked in, followed by the head of Omnicorp Legal. Julian turned to run, but there was nowhere to go. He backed up against the screen, his own fraudulent expenses glowing behind his head like a halo of guilt. Ethan. He screamed, his voice cracking. You can't do this. I have rights. Jessica. Jess, tell him. He looked at the glass wall. Jessica was backing away. She was shaking her head. She saw the police. She saw the end of the dream. She can't help you, Julian, I said. She's just realizing that she packed her bags for the wrong trip. I turned to the officers. Gentlemen, this man has embezzled over $50,000 from my company in the last 30 days. You have the evidence on the screen. As the officers grabbed Julian, handcuffing him in front of the entire board of directors, I walked over to the glass wall. I looked at Jessica. She placed her hand on the glass. She was crying. She mouthed the word Ethan. I looked at her. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just looked at her like she was a line item on a budget that I had decided to cut. Then, I reached up and pulled the blinds shut. The police escorted Julian out through the service elevator to avoid a scene in the lobby, though the damage was already done. The board meeting resumed, but the energy had shifted. The executives looked at me not just with respect, but with a healthy dose of fear. I signed the authorization for the external audit, shook hands with Robert, and walked out. I didn't take the service elevator. I took the main lift down to the lobby. I knew she would be there. Jessica wasn't the type to walk away when there was still a chance to salvage the situation. When the elevator doors slid open, she was standing right where I left her, near the security turnstiles. Her sunglasses were off. Her eyes were red. She looked small against the backdrop of the empire I owned. She rushed toward me, but Leo, the valet who was now back at his post near the door, stepped in her path. "It's okay, Leo," I said, walking past the security desk. Jessica ran to me, grabbing my arm. Her grip was desperate. "Ethan. Oh my God, are you okay? That was insane. I had no idea he was a criminal. I thought he was a rising star." "He was a shooting star, Jessica," I said, not slowing down. "Burned bright, burned fast, and crashed." "I was so scared," she said, falling into step beside me, trying to match my stride. "He lied to me, Ethan. He manipulated me. You saw that, right? I was a victim here." I stopped in the middle of the atrium. The morning sun was streaming through the glass ceiling, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. "A victim?" I asked, looking down at her. "You weren't a victim when you packed your bags this morning. You weren't a victim when you told me I was boring. You were excited. You were cruel. I was confused." She pleaded, tears spilling over. "I was having a midlife crisis. I didn't mean any of it. I love you, Ethan. I love our life. The house, the suburbs, it's peaceful. I miss peace. You miss safety," I corrected her. "And now that you know the safety comes with $1 billion safety net, you suddenly find it attractive again." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a set of keys. Not the Lexus keys. The Aston Martin keys. "Ethan, please," she whispered, touching the lapel of my suit. "We can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can take a trip. You have all this power, we can do anything. Just take me home." I looked at her hand on my suit. Then I looked at her eyes. I saw the calculation behind the tears. She was already redecorating the penthouse in her mind. "I am going home, Jessica," I said, gently removing her hand. "But the locks were changed an hour ago." Her face went pale. "What?" "I called the locksmith before I left," I said calmly. "And I cancelled the joint credit cards." "And the Range Rover?" "It's leased under Omnicorp. I've ordered a repo team to collect it from Julian's apartment complex." "But, where am I supposed to go?" She stammered. "I gave up the lease on my studio. I have nowhere." I stepped closer, my voice dropping to a whisper. "You wanted fire, Jessica. You wanted risk. You wanted a life that wasn't predictable." I gestured to the glass doors leading to the busy street outside. "Being homeless is very unpredictable. Good luck." I walked away. "Ethan!" She screamed, her voice echoing off the marble walls. "You can't do this. I'm your wife." "My ex-wife," I called back without turning around. "My lawyers will be in touch." They're not boring, either. I walked out to the curb. Leo opened the door of the Aston Martin. I slid into the leather seat, the engine roaring to life with a deep, throaty growl. As I pulled away, I checked the rearview mirror. Jessica was standing on the sidewalk, watching the silver car disappear into traffic, looking like a traveler who had missed the last flight out of a war zone. The café on the Champs-Élysées was crowded, but the waiter had saved my usual table in the corner. Paris in the autumn was exactly as beautiful as they said. I sipped my espresso and opened the Financial Times on my tablet. Omnicorp stock was up 12% since the restructuring of the Apex division. I scrolled down to the legal section. There was a small blurb. Former tech executive sentenced to 4 years. Julian Vane had taken a plea deal. Embezzlement and wire fraud. He wouldn't be seeing a boardroom or a Maserati for a long time. And Jessica? I didn't need to read the news to know where she was. My lawyer had given me the update last week. She was living in a small apartment in Ohio with her sister, working as a receptionist at a dental clinic. She sent emails occasionally. Long, rambling apologies. I had a filter set up. They went straight to trash. Is this seat taken? I looked up. A woman was standing there. She was elegant, holding a book on architecture. She didn't look at my watch. She didn't look at my shoes. She looked at my eyes. No, I said, smiling. It's free. I'm Claire, she said, sitting down. I hate to disturb you, but you looked like the only person here who was actually enjoying the silence. I value silence, I said. I used to have a very noisy life. And now? She asked. I looked at the bustling street, at the golden leaves falling from the trees, and felt the weight of the master key in my pocket. Now, I said, signaling the waiter for another cup. Now, I'm just enjoying the view. I wasn't the boring accountant anymore. I wasn't the ghost. I was just Ethan. And for the first time in a long time, the ledger was balanced.
Next story in 3, 2, 1.
The courtroom smelled of floor wax and stale despair. It was a specific scent, one I had grown used to over the last 4 months of hell. But today, the air felt heavier, thicker, like the oxygen was being sucked out of the room by the sheer magnitude of the greed sitting at the plaintiff's table. Vanessa sat there, looking like a mourning widow in a black dress that I knew for a fact cost $3,000 because I saw the charge on the joint account before she froze it. She wasn't mourning, though. She was hunting. Her lawyer, Mr. Blackwood, stood up. He was a shark in a pinstripe suit, a man who charged $600 an hour to destroy lives. He adjusted his tie, looking at me with a mixture of pity and contempt. "Your Honor," he began, his voice smooth, practiced. "We are asking for a monthly spousal support of $15,000. My client has suffered enough. She supported this man for 5 years while he tinkered in his basement, playing with computers, refusing to get a real job. She sacrificed her prime years for a dreamer who never woke up." I sat still. My hands were folded on the table. I wore a suit I bought off the rack at a department store 5 years ago. It was slightly tight in the shoulders. I hadn't shaved perfectly. To the world, I looked exactly like what Blackwood was painting me to be, a defeated, unemployed loser. Vanessa dabbed at her dry eyes with a tissue. "I just wanted him to step up, Your Honor," she whispered, loud enough for the microphone to catch. "I worked double shifts at the clinic. I paid the mortgage. And he just sat in the dark, typing. He said he was building something. But bills don't get paid with code." The judge, a stern man in his 60s named Judge Holloway, peered over his reading glasses. He looked tired. He'd probably heard this story 1,000 times. "Mr. Sterling," the judge addressed me. "Your financial affidavit lists your occupation as independent consultant with an income of 0 for the last 6 months?" "That is correct, Your Honor," I said. My voice was raspy. I hadn't spoken much lately. Blackwood scoffed. See? He's hiding income, or he's simply refusing to work out of spite. He's an anchor, Your Honor. And Vanessa has cut the rope. We are asking for the house, the car, and the alimony. It's only fair restitution for the burden she carried. I looked at Vanessa. She briefly met my gaze. Behind the fake tears, there was a glint of triumph. She thought she had already won. She thought this was the final scene of her victimhood movie. She didn't know the movie was just starting. I let my mind drift back to 3 years ago. The memory was sharp, stinging like a paper cut. I was in the basement, my cave, as she called it. The hum of the servers was the only music I listened to. I had been awake for 36 hours, finalizing the encryption protocol. Vanessa had stormed down the stairs, throwing a laundry basket onto the floor. "Look at you," she had sneered, standing over me. "You smell like coffee and failure, David. My sister's husband just bought a boat." "A boat? And what do we have? A server rack that eats up our electricity bill?" "Vanessa, please," I had mumbled, eyes glued to the screen. "I'm close. This algorithm, it's going to change how data is secured. It's not just a project. It's a toy." She screamed, kicking the chair. "Grow up, David. You're 32. You're not Mark Zuckerberg. You're just a guy wasting his life while his wife pays for the internet he uses to play pretend." She had left me there. And that night, she didn't come home until 3 a.m. She smelled of expensive cologne I didn't own. When I asked her, she said she was working late. I believed her because I wanted to. Or maybe because I was too focused on what was happening on my screen to care. Back in the courtroom, Blackwood was wrapping up his opening statement. "This man is a parasite, Your Honor. He drained her finances and now he wants to walk away scot-free. We demand full financial disclosure of his so-called consulting business. We believe he is hiding assets in shell companies." Judge Holloway sighed, rubbing his temples. "Mr. Sterling, do you have the documents regarding your business entity?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said. I reached into my battered leather briefcase. It was old, scuffed. Vanessa rolled her eyes when she saw it. I pulled out a single, thick manila envelope. It was sealed with red wax, an old-fashioned touch, but necessary for the level of security contained inside. I stood up and walked to the bench. Blackwood tried to intercept me. "Objection. I haven't seen these documents. This is trial by ambush. It's just the incorporation papers and the P&L statement you asked for," I said calmly. The bailiff took the envelope and handed it to Judge Holloway. The room went silent. The only sound was the tearing of the heavy paper as the judge opened the envelope. Vanessa leaned over to Blackwood, whispering loudly. "Watch him claim he makes $50 a month. He's pathetic." Judge Holloway pulled out the document. It was a single sheet of heavy, cream-colored paper with a silver-embossed header. He adjusted his glasses. He read the header. Then he froze. He blinked, leaning closer to the paper as if he didn't trust his own vision. He looked up at me, then back at the paper. His expression shifted from boredom to confusion, and finally, to something that looked a lot like shock. "Mr. Sterling," the judge said slowly. "This document, this is the holding company for your assets?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And you are the sole proprietor?" 100% ownership, Your Honor." The judge slowly lowered the paper. He looked at Blackwood, then at Vanessa. A strange, unreadable smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Mr. Blackwood," the judge said, his voice dropping an octave. "You accuse the defendant of being a parasite? Of wasting his time on, what did you call it? A toy?" "Yes, Your Honor," Blackwood said, sensing a trap but unsure where it was. The judge held up the document. The silver lettering caught the courtroom lights. The company listed here is Aegis Protocol Systems. Blackwood frowned. I'm sorry, Your Honor? I'm not familiar. But Vanessa gasped. She didn't know the name, but she saw the reaction of the court clerk. The clerk's jaw had dropped. Judge Holloway leaned forward, interlocking his fingers. Mr. Blackwood, Aegis Protocol is the cybersecurity firm that this very courthouse contracted 3 months ago to overhaul our entire federal database. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, the Department of Defense just signed an exclusive contract with them last week. The judge turned his gaze to me. It wasn't the look you give a deadbeat. It was the look you give a legend. Mr. Sterling, are you telling me you invented the ghost key encryption? I nodded once. I wrote the code in my basement, Your Honor, while my wife was working late. The judge looked back at Vanessa. His face hardened. So, Mr. Blackwood, you are asking for alimony from a man who, according to this valuation, made $42 million last quarter? Vanessa's face went white. Not pale. Dead white. She grabbed Blackwood's arm, her fingernails digging into his suit. 40 million? She choked out. The judge wasn't done. But there is something else here, Mr. Sterling. The judge tapped the paper. There is a second document in this folder. A forensic audit of the household finances? Yes, Your Honor, I said. Since my company secures banking systems, I have access to detailed metadata. The judge opened the second page. His eyes narrowed. Oh, he said softly. Oh, this is very interesting. He looked at Vanessa. The gavel hovered in his hand. Ms. Vanessa, it seems Mr. Sterling hasn't just been coding. He's been tracking. And what he found, well, let's just say your request for alimony is about to become a criminal investigation. The silence that followed the judge's words was heavy, suffocating. It wasn't the quiet of a library, it was the quiet of a bomb squad watching a timer hit 0. Vanessa's face had lost all its color. She looked at the judge, then at me, then at the document trembling in Judge Holloway's hand. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish on dry land. Criminal investigation? She squeaked. It was the first time I had heard her voice without a layer of condescension in 5 years. Mr. Blackwood, however, recovered faster. He was a professional parasite. He smelled blood in the water, not mine anymore, but the money's. He straightened his tie, his eyes gleaming with a new, predatory hunger. Your Honor, Blackwood interjected, his voice rising with excitement. If the defendant is indeed worth $40 million, then my client's request for $15,000 a month is woefully inadequate. This is a marital asset. Aegis Protocol was developed during the marriage. Under state law, Vanessa is entitled to 50%. We are amending our claim. We want $20 million. He slammed his hand on the table, grinning at Vanessa. We hit the jackpot, Van. Don't worry about the investigation. It's just a scare tactic. Vanessa blinked, the fear in her eyes replaced by a sudden, manic greed. She sat up straighter. Yes, that's right. I supported him. I bought him the coffee he drank while he wrote that code. Half of it is mine. I watched them. It was fascinating, really. Like watching vultures fight over a carcass that was still breathing and holding a shotgun. Mr. Blackwood, I said, my voice cutting through their celebration. You might want to let the judge finish reading page 3 before you start spending my money. Judge Holloway didn't look up. He was tracing a line on the document with his finger, his eyebrows knitting together in a frown of deep disapproval. Mr. Sterling is right, the judge said, his voice dropping to a gravelly low. Mr. Blackwood, you claimed your client worked double shifts to support the household? That she was the sole provider? Absolutely, Your Honor, Blackwood said confidently. She is a saint. Then explain to me, the judge said, flipping the page so it faced the courtroom, why Mr. Sterling's forensic audit shows that for the last 2 years, $50,000 was siphoned out of Mr. Sterling's savings account and transferred to an offshore entity in the Cayman Islands. Vanessa froze. Her hand went to her throat. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered. David managed the finances. He must be framing me. I stood up slowly. I walked toward the witness stand. You're forgetting what I do, Vanessa, I said softly. I don't just secure data. I trace it. Aegis stands for shield, but my proprietary algorithm is called the Hunter. It tags every digital dollar that touches my servers. I turned to the judge. Your Honor, if you look at the metadata on those transfers, you'll see the IP address they originated from. It wasn't my basement. It was the Wi-Fi network at the Blue Harbor Marina. The judge squinted at the paper. Confirmed. IP address matches. Salty Dog Yacht Club. I looked at Vanessa. Who has a boat at the marina, Vanessa? My brother-in-law? No. He sold his. Vanessa was shaking now, her eyes darting to the exit. It was Chad, wasn't it? I asked. Your personal trainer? Blackwood looked at his client, horrified. Vanessa? What is he talking about? It's a lie. She screamed, standing up. He's hacking the bank. He's making it up. I don't need to make it up, I said calmly. Because I also recovered the deleted emails from your phone, Vanessa. The ones you sent to Chad last week. I pulled another piece of paper from my pocket. I didn't give it to the judge this time. I read it aloud. Just hold on a little longer, babe. The divorce court is going to gut him. We'll have the alimony, plus the stash in the Caymans. He's too stupid to notice the missing 50 grand. He's just a code monkey. I folded the paper. A code monkey who just built the cage you walked into. The courtroom erupted. The stenographer stopped typing, her jaw open. Even the bailiff looked shocked. Judge Holloway slammed his gavel down. Silence! He roared. Ms. Vanessa, sit down. Now! She collapsed into her chair, sobbing, real tears this time. Tears of terror. Mr. Blackwood, the judge said, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. Your client filed a sworn financial affidavit stating she had no hidden assets. She stated under oath that she was faithful and the sole provider. This document proves perjury. It proves embezzlement. And it proves fraud. Blackwood was sweating profusely. He began packing his briefcase with trembling hands. Your Honor, I was not aware of these facts. I request a recess to counsel my client. There will be no recess, Judge Holloway said, his eyes hard as flint. We are finishing this today. The judge looked at me. The respect in his eyes was gone, replaced by something else, camaraderie. He knew what it was like to deal with liars. Mr. Sterling, the judge said, since you have access to the banking system, can you tell me the current balance of this offshore account she tried to hide? I can do better than that, Your Honor, I said, pulling out my phone. Since the funds were stolen from my account, my algorithm flagged them as disputed assets. 5 minutes ago, while Mr. Blackwood was demanding $20 million. I tapped the screen and held it up. I initiated a clawback protocol. The Cayman account is now empty. The money has been returned to my primary holding. Vanessa let out a wail of despair. No! That was our future. Chad is going to leave me. And that, I said, looking her dead in the eye, is the least of your problems. Judge Holloway leaned forward, a dark smile playing on his lips. Indeed it is, the judge said. Because, Ms. Vanessa, do you know who prosecutes perjury in this district? It's not me. He pointed a finger at the back of the courtroom. It's the district attorney. And coincidentally, I believe his office uses Aegis protocol for their email security. I'm sure Mr. Sterling can send in these files within seconds. I smiled. It's already done, Your Honor. Sent it as an encrypted attachment 3 minutes ago. The doors at the back of the courtroom opened. 2 police officers stepped inside, waiting for a signal. Judge Holloway picked up his gavel. He didn't look tired anymore. He looked energized. Ms. Vanessa, Mr. Blackwood, the judge said, I am going to issue a ruling now. And I suggest you listen very carefully, because it will be the last thing you hear before you are taken into custody. The judge's voice didn't boom. It didn't need to. It cut through the air with the precision of a scalpel. In 20 years on the bench, Judge Holloway began, staring down at Vanessa over his spectacles. I have seen greed. I have seen incompetence. But rarely have I seen such a potent combination of both sitting at the plaintiff's table. He picked up a pen and began writing furiously on the docket. The scratching sound was the only noise in the room. Vanessa was trembling so violently her chair rattled against the floor. Mr. Blackwood, the judge said without looking up. Your motion for alimony is denied. With prejudice. That means you cannot file it again. Ever. Blackwood nodded quickly, wiping sweat from his upper lip. Understood, Your Honor. Furthermore, the judge continued, I am granting Mr. Sterling's countermotion for legal fees. Since Ms. Vanessa admitted to stealing $50,000, and since she has wasted the court's time with a fraudulent claim, she is ordered to pay Mr. Sterling's legal costs. Vanessa looked up, eyes wide with panic. But I don't have any money. You took it back. The account is empty. Then I suggest you sell the designer dress you're wearing, the judge said coldly. Or perhaps ask your friend Chad for a loan. Although, given what comes next, I doubt he'll be answering your calls. The judge signed the paper with a final, aggressive flourish and looked at the police officers standing by the door. He nodded. Officers, the judge said. The civil portion of this trial is concluded. You may execute the warrant for grand larceny and perjury. The 2 officers stepped forward. The sound of heavy boots on the wood floor echoed like a death march. Vanessa scrambled backward, knocking her chair over. No! You can't. Mr. Blackwood, do something. Stop them! Blackwood stood up, but not to help her. He grabbed his briefcase and took a distinct step away from her, creating a physical gap between them. I am withdrawing as counsel, Your Honor, Blackwood said fast. I cannot represent a client who perjures herself. It's an ethical violation. Smart move, counselor, the judge muttered. You coward! Vanessa screamed at her lawyer. You said we would win. You said he was a loser. The first officer reached her. He didn't handle her gently. He pulled her arms behind her back. The metallic click-click of the handcuffs was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of my freedom. David! She screamed, twisting her head to look at me. The mask of arrogance was completely gone. She was just a desperate, trapped animal. David, tell them to stop. I'm your wife. We built a life together. You can't let them take me to jail. I stood there, watching her. I remembered the basement. I remembered her calling my life's work a toy. I remembered the lonely nights while she was at the marina. I walked over to her. I leaned in close, so only she could hear me. You're right, Vanessa, I whispered. We did build a life. I built the Aegis system. And you built a case against yourself. I straightened up and looked at the officer. She has the right to remain silent, officer. I suggest you make sure she uses it. Let's go, ma'am, the officer grunted, dragging her toward the side exit, the one reserved for prisoners. David! I love you! I'm sorry. David! Her screams faded as the heavy oak door slammed shut behind her. The silence that followed was pure bliss. It was cleaner than the air in my server room. Mr. Blackwood looked at me, gave a weak, apologetic nod, and practically ran out the main doors. I looked up at the bench. Judge Holloway was taking off his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. He looked at me and smiled, a genuine, tired smile. "Mr. Sterling," he said. "Your Honor? The court thanks you for your service to the county's cybersecurity," he said. "And, off the record? That Hunter algorithm is impressive work. My clerk tells me it caught a phishing attempt on my email just this morning." "I'm glad to hear it, Judge," I said. "I'll make sure your license is renewed for free. Consider it a professional courtesy." The judge chuckled. "Case dismissed. Good luck, son." I walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun. For the first time in years, the light didn't hurt my eyes. It felt warm. The wind on the open ocean was different than the stale air of a courtroom. It tasted of salt and liberty. I sat on the aft deck of the Aegis II, my new 60-foot catamaran. I typed a few lines of code on my laptop, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The satellite internet connection I had installed was faster than anything I ever had in that basement. A notification popped up on the screen. It was a news alert from the local paper. Update, sentencing in Sterling fraud case. I clicked it. Vanessa had taken a plea deal. 3 years in state prison for embezzlement and fraud. The article mentioned that the prosecution's star witness had been a man named Chad Miller. I laughed out loud. Of course. Chad had turned on her the second the police questioned him about the money laundering. He testified against her to save his own skin. He kept his freedom, but according to the report, his reputation was destroyed. He was working as a deckhand on a fishing trawler now. And Vanessa? She was in a cell much smaller than my basement, wearing an orange jumpsuit that definitely wasn't designer. I closed the article. I didn't feel happy about her suffering. I just felt indifferent. She was a line of bad code that I had finally debugged and deleted from the system. "Mr. Sterling?" I looked up. My new attorney, my corporate attorney, who actually respected me, was standing there with a bottle of vintage champagne. "The acquisition papers are ready to sign," she said. "Google wants to integrate Go's key into their cloud servers. The offer is on the table. $120 million. I looked at the contract. Then I looked at the endless blue horizon. "Tell them 150, I said, taking the glass of champagne. "And tell them they have to wait until Monday. I'm taking the weekend off." "Celebration?" she asked. "No," I said, clinking my glass against hers. "Just enjoying the quiet. It turns out, silence is the most expensive luxury of all." I took a sip. The yacht rocked gently on the waves. I wasn't the guy in the basement anymore. I wasn't the husband who wasn't good enough. I was the architect. And my life was finally running on my own operating system. And the firewall? It was impenetrable.
Next story in 3, 2, 1.
The vibration of the phone against the mahogany table was the only thing grounding me. The restaurant buzzed with the low hum of deals being made and affairs being hidden, the air thick with the scent of truffle oil and expensive cologne. But all I could smell was the sudden, sharp metallic tang of my own anxiety. Elena didn't look at me. She was too busy dissecting the rim of her wine glass with a manicured fingernail. "I can't do this anymore, Mark." The words were soft, but they landed like a sledgehammer. I reached for her hand, but she pulled it away as if my skin were coated in something corrosive. "Can't do what? Dinner? We can go somewhere else. I know this place is a bit loud, but... us." She finally looked up, and her eyes were void of anything resembling the warmth I had woken up to for the last 3 years. "I can't do us. You're stagnant." Stagnant. The word hung in the air between us. I looked down at my simple button-down shirt, the one she always said made me look approachable. Apparently, approachable was no longer the currency she was trading in. Stagnant. "Elena, I just finished the coding for the new interface." Once the merger goes through next week, things are going to change. I told you, patience is. Patience doesn't pay for trips to the Amalfi Coast, Mark. Patience doesn't get me a table at Le Zenith without a reservation. She gestured vaguely around the room, her voice rising just enough to draw the gaze of the couple at the next table. I'm 26. I'm in my prime. And I'm wasting it waiting for a lottery ticket that's never going to cash in. A shadow fell over the table. I looked up to see a man standing there. He was a caricature of corporate success. Italian suit that cost more than my first car, teeth whitened to an aggressive brightness, and a Rolex Submariner that he made sure to flash as he adjusted his cuff. Everything okay here, babe? Is he making it difficult? Babe. My stomach dropped through the floor. I looked from him to Elena. The shame on her face wasn't for cheating, it was for being seen with me. No, Chad. We're just finishing up. She stood up, smoothing her dress, instantly transforming from the woman who used to eat takeout pizza on my floor into a cold, social climbing stranger. Chad laughed, a dry, dismissive sound. He looked at me, scanning me from head to toe, his eyes lingering on my scuffed boots with a smirk that made my blood boil. So, this is the anchor. The one dragging you down. He didn't wait for an answer. He pulled a thick leather wallet from his jacket, pulled out a crisp $100 bill, and flicked it onto the table. It landed in my half-eaten risotto. For the meal, champ. Consider it a severance package. He put a hand on the small of Elena's back, guiding her away. She didn't look back. Not once. I sat there, the heat rising in my neck, watching them weave through the tables. The waiter approached, eyeing the bill and the food, his expression a mix of pity and disgust. Check, sir. I didn't say a word. I just nodded, my hands clenching into fists under the table so hard my knuckles turned white. The walk back to our apartment was a blur of neon lights and cold rain. It was fitting. Every step felt heavier than the last. I unlocked the door to the quiet emptiness of the living room. It was a modest place. Clean, functional, but undeniably simple. What Elena didn't know, what no one knew, was that this simplicity was a choice, not a constraint. I sank onto the couch, the silence pressing in on my ears. My eyes drifted to the framed photo on the mantel. It was from 3 years ago. Elena and I, soaking wet from a sudden downpour, laughing, eating cheap hot dogs on a park bench. She looked happy then. Or maybe she was just good at acting. I remembered the nights I stayed up until 4 a.m., helping her study for her marketing exams. I remembered paying off her student loans quietly, telling her I won a small raffle so she wouldn't feel indebted. I remembered holding her when she didn't get that first internship, telling her she was destined for greatness. And this was the return on investment. The sound of a key in the lock snapped me out of the spiral. The door swung open. Elena walked in, but she wasn't alone. Chad was with her, carrying empty cardboard boxes. "You're still here?" Chad asked, stepping inside without an invitation, looking around the apartment with a sneer. "God, it smells like mediocrity in here. How did you survive this long, babe?" Elena walked past me into the bedroom, avoiding eye contact. "I'm just getting my things, Mark. It won't take long." I stood up. "You brought him here? To our home?" "It's not a home, Mark," she called out from the bedroom, the sound of hangers sliding violently across the metal rod echoing. "It's a cage. And Chad is kind enough to help me move my stuff to his penthouse. You know, in the Skyview Tower." Chad leaned against the wall, checking his phone. "Yeah, 45th floor. View of the whole city. You should see it sometime. Oh wait, security doesn't let delivery guys up that high." He chuckled at his own joke. I stared at him. I really looked at him. I recognized the company logo on the lapel pin of his jacket. Next Gen Dynamics. A cold, calm clarity washed over me, The shaking in my hands stopped. Next Gen, I said, my voice steady. You work in acquisitions. Chad looked up, surprised I was speaking to him. VP of Acquisitions, actually. Just got promoted. Big bonus, big office, big future. Things you wouldn't understand. Is that so? Yeah. In fact, tomorrow is a huge day. The new owner is finally coming in to inspect the troops. Rumor has it he's some eccentric recluse billionaire who bought us out last month. I'm presenting the quarterly strategy. I'm going to run this place by the end of the year. He walked over to the bookshelf, picking up one of my coding textbooks and tossing it carelessly back down. That's how the world works, buddy. Lions eat, and sheep get left in barely furnished apartments. Elena came out, dragging 2 large suitcases. She looked breathless, her cheeks flushed, not from exertion, but from the thrill of her upgrade. I'm ready, she said to Chad, finally glancing at me. Mark, keep the toaster. And the TV. It's too small for Chad's place anyway. Generous, I said. She paused at the door, her hand on the knob. For a second, I thought I saw a flicker of hesitation. Don't look at me like that. I need security, Mark. I need a man who goes places. Chad he's the future. Goodbye, Elena, I said. Chad smirked, grabbing the suitcases. Don't worry, pal. I'll take good care of her. Better than you ever could. The door slammed shut. The silence returned, but this time, it didn't feel heavy. It felt like the calm before a storm. I walked over to the window and watched them get into a sleek black Porsche parked illegally in the loading zone. I watched them drive away. Then, I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I dialed a number I hadn't used in 6 months. Mr. Sterling. The voice on the other end was sharp, professional. Sarah, I said. Prepare the boardroom for tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. I'm coming in. Of course, sir. The entire board is anxious to finally meet you. Shall I alert the department heads? No, I said, watching the taillights of the Porsche disappear around the corner. Especially not acquisitions. I want that to be a surprise. I hung up. I wasn't Mark the stagnant boyfriend anymore. I was Marcus Sterling, majority shareholder and the new owner of Next Gen Dynamics. And tomorrow, the lion was going to find out he was standing in the middle of a dragon's den. I walked to the closet and pushed aside the row of flannel shirts and worn denim. In the back, zipped inside a garment bag I hadn't touched in a year, was my bespoke charcoal suit. I ran my hand over the fabric. Karma wasn't a force of nature. Tomorrow, Karma was going to be a person. And he was going to be waiting in the lobby. The morning sun hit the glass facade of the Next Gen Dynamics tower, turning the building into a monolith of gold and steel. I stood on the sidewalk across the street, adjusting my cufflink. It was a small, silver knot, a gift from my late father. He always said, true power doesn't need to shout, Marcus. It whispers. Today, I was going to whisper so loud it would shatter windows. I caught my reflection in a shop window. Gone was the slouching, tired coder in the flannel shirt. The man looking back at me wore a charcoal 3-piece suit cut from Italian wool, tailored to within a millimeter of perfection. My hair was slicked back. My posture was rigid. I looked like a predator who had just finished fasting. I crossed the street. My heart wasn't racing. It was beating with a slow, heavy rhythm. Thump. Thump. Like a war drum. I pushed through the revolving doors and the cool, conditioned air of the lobby hit me. It smelled of espresso and floor wax. The Next Gen lobby was a cavernous space of marble and intimidation, designed to make visitors feel small. And there they were. Near the reception desk, Chad was holding court. He was leaning against the marble counter, laughing loudly at something the receptionist had said, while Elena stood by his side, looking like a lost ornament. She was wearing a new dress, something designer, probably bought on credit or with Chad's future bonus. I walked towards them. The click of my dress shoes on the marble was sharp, distinct. Clack. 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 Elena saw me first. Her eyes widened, scanning me from the shoes up to the tie, then to my face. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. The confusion on her face was delicious. She didn't recognize the clothes, but she recognized the man. And the two didn't match. "Mark?" she whispered. Chad spun around. His smile vanished, replaced by that familiar, sneering look of annoyance. But then he paused. He took in the suit. He took in the watch on my wrist, a Patek Philippe that cost more than his BMW. His brow furrowed. For a split second, I saw insecurity flicker behind his eyes. Then, his ego wrestled it back down. Well, Chad laughed, stepping away from the counter to block my path. "Look who played dress up. What is this, Mark? You going to a funeral? Or did you rent a tux to beg for your job back?" He stepped into my personal space. He smelled of aggressive aftershave and arrogance. "I'm here for a meeting," I said calmly. My voice was lower than usual. Steadier. "A meeting?" Chad barked a laugh, looking back at Elena and the receptionist for an audience. "Did you hear that? He's here for a meeting. Mark, the only meeting you're qualified for is with the janitorial staff. And I think they're fully staffed." Elena tugged on his sleeve. She looked uneasy. "Chad, maybe we should just go up." "No, babe. Watch this," Chad said, shaking her off. He turned back to me, his voice raising. He wanted a spectacle. He wanted to assert dominance in his territory. "You don't get it, do you? I run this division now. You don't just walk into my building." "Your building?" I raised an eyebrow. "I wasn't aware your name was on the lease." "It might as well be," Chad shouted. People were stopping now. Employees with coffees, couriers with packages, everyone was watching. "I am the Vice President of Acquisitions. I decide who walks through these turnstiles. And I say you're trespassing." He turned to the security desk. "Hey! Miller! Get over here." A burly security guard, Miller, who I knew had worked here for 10 years, lumbered over. He looked tired. He looked at Chad, then he looked at me. "Mr. Chad, is there a problem?" Miller asked, his hand hovering near his belt. "Yeah, there's a problem," Chad pointed a finger at my chest, almost poking the lapel of my suit. "This ex-employee is harassing me and my girlfriend. He's stalking us. I want him removed. Now. Toss him on the pavement." Elena looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Mark, just go. Please. Don't embarrass yourself." "I'm not the one who should be embarrassed, Elena," I said, holding her gaze. Chad snapped. "Miller. I gave you a direct order. If you want to keep your job, you'll drag this trash out of here right now." Miller hesitated. He looked at me again, squinting slightly. I gave him a nearly imperceptible nod. "I'm waiting." Chad screamed, his face turning red. "Do I need to call the new owner myself? Do I need to tell him his security staff is incompetent?" "Actually," I said, cutting through the noise. "That won't be necessary." "Shut up." Chad spat. "You don't speak unless I tell you to." "Chad," I said, stepping forward. I didn't shout, but my voice carried through the silent lobby like a gunshot. "You mentioned the new owner. The eccentric recluse billionaire. The one you're presenting to today. What do you know about it?" Chad sneered, though he took a half step back. The energy had shifted. He felt it. I reached into my inner jacket pocket. Miller tensed up, but I moved slowly. I pulled out a lanyard. But it wasn't the standard white visitor pass. And it wasn't the blue employee badge. It was black. Solid, matte black with a gold chip embedded in the center. I held it up. The light caught the gold chip. "Do you know what this is, Chad?" I asked. Chad stared at the card. He blinked. Where did you steal that?" "Keycard level 0, I explained, my voice turning cold. "Universal access. It opens the server rooms. It opens the vault. It opens the penthouse boardroom." I took another step toward him. "And there is only one person in the world who has one." The elevator doors behind the security desk pinged open. A group of 6 people walked out. They were all in gray suits, looking serious. At the front was Sarah, the woman I had spoken to on the phone, and beside her was Mr. Henderson, the general counsel of the company. Chad's face went pale. "Mr. Henderson?" I was just handling a security breach. This man." Mr. Henderson ignored Chad entirely. He walked straight past him, his eyes locked on me. He stopped 3 feet away, clasped his hands in front of him, and bowed his head slightly. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling," Henderson said. "The board is assembled upstairs. We were waiting for your arrival." Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. Elena gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Chad looked from Henderson to me, his jaw literally dropping open, his eyes bulging like a fish pulled out of water. Mr. Sterling." I looked at Chad. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "You're late for your presentation, Chad," I said softly. "But that's okay. We can start the performance review right here." I turned to the receptionist. "Turn off the lobby music, please. I want everyone to hear this." The silence in the lobby was absolute, broken only by the hum of the ventilation system. Chad looked like he was trying to solve a complex math equation in a language he didn't speak. His face cycled through a spectrum of colors, red, then gray, then a sickly, pale white. "Mr. Sterling." Chad squeaked. His voice cracked, stripping away every ounce of the bravado he had worn like armor just moments ago. I don't understand. "Mark. You code interfaces. You live in a walk-up." "I code interfaces because I enjoy it, Chad," I said, unbuttoning my jacket and stepping closer. "And I live in a walk-up because I don't need a penthouse to know my worth." "But you're right about one thing. I was working on the new interface. Specifically, the audit algorithm for the acquisitions department." Chad's eyes darted side to side, looking for an exit that didn't exist. The audit?" "Yes," I continued, my voice projecting clearly to the crowd of employees now gathering on the mezzanine. "See, when I bought NextGen Dynamics 6 weeks ago for $400 million, I noticed some irregularities in the expense accounts. Client dinners that looked a lot like personal vacations. Consulting fees that went to shell companies." I pulled a folded piece of paper from my pocket. It wasn't a speech. It was a printout. $350,000, Chad, I read the number slowly. "That's how much you've embezzled in the last 18 months to fund your lifestyle. The suit. The watch. The lease on the Skyview apartment." I looked at Elena. "It's all company money. Stolen money." Elena let out a sharp gasp, stepping away from Chad as if he were radioactive. "Chad. Is that true?" Chad started to sweat, beads forming instantly on his forehead. "Babe, no, it's accounting errors. Mark, listen, we go way back, right? Just a little misunderstanding between friends." "We are not friends," I said, my voice dropping to ice. "And you are not a vice president. As of this moment, you are a liability." I turned to Miller, the security guard who was still watching, wide-eyed. "Miller," I said. You have a new order. Escort this man out of the building. Revoke his clearance. And make sure he doesn't touch a single computer on his way out. Miller straightened up, a grin spreading across his face. He'd clearly wanted to do this for years. With pleasure, Mr. Sterling. Miller grabbed Chad by the arm, not gently. Chad tried to pull away, shouting, "You can't do this. I have rights. I'm the future of this company." "Your history, Chad," I said. As Miller dragged a kicking and screaming Chad towards the revolving doors, the lobby erupted into murmurs. I watched him go, feeling a weight lift off my chest that I hadn't realized was there. Then, I felt a hand on my arm. I looked down. It was Elena. She had tears in her eyes, big, perfect, cinematic tears. She looked up at me with that soft, vulnerable expression that used to melt my heart. "Mark," she whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't know. He lied to me. He manipulated me. She stepped closer, her fingers brushing the lapel of my suit. I was so confused. "But seeing you now, taking charge like this is the man I always knew you were. Can we go somewhere quiet? Talk. I can explain everything." For a second, the memory of her laugh played in my mind. The good times. It would be so easy to let her back in. To win. To have the girl and the money. But then I remembered the restaurant. I remembered stagnant. I gently removed her hand from my arm. "Elena," I said softly. "Yes." She smiled, hopeful. "You said you needed a man who goes places," I said. "And I am going places. I have a board meeting on the 45th floor." I took a step back. "But you don't have a pass." I turned my back on her. "Mr. Henderson, shall we?" "Mark." She cried out, her voice cracking with real desperation now. "Mark, please. You can't leave me here. I have nowhere to go." He kicked me out of the apartment. I didn't stop walking. I didn't look back. I walked toward the elevator, the heavy silver doors sliding open to welcome me. As the doors closed, the last thing I saw was Elena standing alone in the middle of the marble floor, realizing that the lottery ticket she had thrown away had just hit the jackpot. The view from the CEO's office really was spectacular. The city looked like a circuit board of lights from up here. I signed the final paperwork for the merger. NextGen Dynamics was more profitable than ever. We had cleaned house, promoted the people who actually did the work, and built a culture of respect. My phone buzzed. It wasn't a text from a panicked ex. It was a notification from a news app. Local news, former tech exec sentenced to 3 years for embezzlement. I clicked the link. There was a photo of Chad, looking disheveled in an orange jumpsuit. The article mentioned he had lost everything, the penthouse, the car, the reputation. And Elena? I scrolled down. I heard through mutual friends she was working 2 jobs, living back with her parents in Ohio. She had sent me a letter a few weeks ago. 4 pages of apologies. I never opened it. I put the phone down and looked at the woman sitting across from my desk. Sarah, my former assistant, now the COO. "Ready for the launch, Marcus?" she asked, smiling. "Ready," I said. I looked at the reflection in the window. The man staring back wasn't angry anymore. He wasn't vengeful. He was just content. Karma had done its job. Now, it was time for me to do mine. I stood up, buttoned my jacket, and walked out of the office. The lions could fight over the scraps. The dragon was flying.
Next story in 3, 2, 1.
The sound of a pen scratching against paper can be the loudest noise in the world when it's signing away 10 years of your life. I stared at the divorce papers sitting on the cheap, laminate table of our rental apartment. The ink was still wet, glistening under the flickering yellow light of the kitchen bulb. It was a Tuesday evening, raining, the kind of cold, relentless rain that seeps into your bones and refuses to leave. But the cold outside was nothing compared to the glacial temperature in the room. Vanessa stood by the door, her arms crossed, tapping her foot impatiently. She was wearing that red dress I used to love, the one I bought her for our 5th anniversary back when I had a steady paycheck. Now, it just looked like a uniform of war. Her suitcases were already packed, lined up in the hallway like soldiers ready to march out of a conquered city. She looked at me and said, "Are you done staring at it? Or do you need me to spell it out for you, David? Sign the damn papers. I have a reservation at 8. I looked up at her, my eyes burning from sleepless nights and the sheer exhaustion of trying to keep everything afloat. I told her, "A reservation? We're ending our marriage, Vanessa. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" She laughed, a harsh, brittle sound that echoed off the bare walls. She said, "Marriage? Is that what you call this? This poverty? This stagnation? David, look around you. You're 32 years old. You're sitting in a one-bedroom apartment that smells like mildew and failed dreams. You don't have a job. You don't have a future. You have a project." She made air quotes with her fingers, her face twisted in a sneer. "I'm done waiting for your ship to come in. It sank years ago." I whispered, "I'm building something. The software is almost ready. Once the beta testing is done, investors are lined up. I just need a little more time. A few more months." She snapped back, "Time is money, and you have neither." She slammed her hand down next to the papers. "I found someone who actually lives in the real world, David. Someone who drives a car that starts on the first try. Someone who can take me to Paris, not just promise it on a vision board." The revelation didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. Somewhere deep down, I knew. I asked her, "So, that's it? You're leaving me for a wallet?" She leaned in close, her perfume overwhelming my senses, the scent that used to mean home, now smelling like betrayal. She said, "I'm leaving you for a man who provides. You? You're just a jobless loser playing with code in a dark room. You're a dead weight, David. And I'm cutting the cord. Sign the papers. Keep the debt. Keep this dump. I want nothing from you because you have nothing to give." My hand trembled as I picked up the pen. The humiliation was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest. I signed my name. The loops of the D and the sharp lines of the D felt final. She snatched the papers the moment the pen lifted from the page. Finally, she breathed out, tucking them into her designer bag. She turned on her heel, the sound of her stilettos clicking on the hardwood floor like a countdown. At the door, she paused, but she didn't look back. She said, "Don't call me. Don't try to win me back when you inevitably end up sleeping in your car. Just disappear, David. It's the best thing you can do for the world." The door slammed shut. The silence that followed was deafening. I sat there for hours, listening to the rain, the ghost of her insults replaying in my mind on an endless loop. Jobless. Loser. Dead weight. That night was the rock bottom. I had $400 in my bank account, a laptop held together by duct tape, and a heart that had been ground into dust. But as the sun began to rise, casting a pale gray light over the empty apartment, something shifted inside me. It wasn't hope. Hope is soft. This was something harder, colder. It was resolve. She was right about one thing. The David she knew was dead. He died the moment that door slammed. The next 3 years were a blur of caffeine, code, and isolation. I moved into a basement studio that was even smaller than the apartment I shared with Vanessa, but it didn't matter. I didn't need space. I needed focus. I stopped shaving. I stopped going out. I ate instant noodles until the thought of sodium made me sick. I became a ghost, just like she asked. But in that silence, I built an empire. My project, the one she mocked, was an AI-driven logistics algorithm designed to optimize global shipping routes. It wasn't sexy. It wasn't flashy, but it was essential. 6 months after the divorce, I secured a microgrant. 12 months in, I had my first major client. 18 months in, I sold the proprietary license to a shipping conglomerate for a sum that had 2 commas in it. But I didn't stop there. I took that capital and founded Apex Systems. We expanded into cybersecurity and cloud infrastructure. By the time the third year rolled around, I wasn't just solvent, I was wealthy. But not the loud, flashy wealth Vanessa chased. I didn't buy a Ferrari. I didn't post champagne photos on Instagram. I stayed in the shadows. I bought a penthouse in the city, sure, but I kept my circle small. I upgraded my wardrobe to bespoke suits, not for vanity, but because I was now walking into boardrooms with senators and CEOs. I worked quietly. I rebuilt myself brick by brick, dollar by dollar. The anger I felt toward Vanessa didn't disappear, but it transformed. It became fuel. Every time I felt tired, every time I wanted to quit, I heard her voice. "You're a dead weight." And I would type faster. I would negotiate harder. 5 years passed. Apex Systems was now the leading tech consultancy in the state. We had just moved into a new headquarters, a gleaming glass tower in the financial district. I sat in my corner office on the 40th floor, looking out over the city that once felt like a prison. It was a crisp autumn morning. The coffee in my hand was Jamaican Blue Mountain, poured by an assistant who anticipated my needs before I even spoke them. My intercom buzzed. It was Sarah, my executive assistant. She said, "Mr. Thorne, the interviews for the new vice president of marketing are scheduled to start in 10 minutes. The first candidate is here." She's a bit early, but she insisted on waiting. I asked, "Thank you, Sarah. Who is it again?" I didn't get a chance to review the final shortlist this morning. Sarah shuffled some papers and said, "Her name is Vanessa Caldwell. She has an impressive resume on paper, though there's a gap in the last year. She seems very eager." The world seemed to stop spinning for a second. The name hung in the air. Vanessa Caldwell. She had kept her maiden name, or perhaps reverted to it. I swiveled my chair around, facing the door. A cold smile, one that didn't reach my eyes, formed on my lips. The universe has a twisted sense of humor, but today, I was the one holding the punchline. I told Sarah to send her in. "And Sarah? Hold my calls. I want to give this candidate my full attention." I stood up and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, keeping my back to the door. I wanted her to see the view first. I wanted her to see the city I now own a piece of. I adjusted my cuffs, the expensive fabric smooth against my skin. The heavy oak door creaked open. I heard the click of heels, familiar, sharp, confident. A voice said, "Good morning." A voice I hadn't heard in 5 years, but one that still haunted my nightmares. It was dripping with that practiced charm she used on strangers. "I'm Vanessa Caldwell. Thank you for seeing me." I didn't turn around immediately. I let the silence stretch, heavy and uncomfortable. I wanted her to sweat. I said, "Please take a seat," keeping my back to her. She replied, "Thank you," the confidence in her voice faltering slightly. I heard the rustle of her sitting down, the soft exhale of breath. Then, slowly, deliberately, I turned around. I turned my chair completely, resting my elbows on the mahogany desk, fingers steeple in front of my face. The sunlight from the window behind me cast my face in shadow, creating a silhouette that felt imposing. I saw her squint slightly, trying to adjust her eyes. I said, "Ms. Caldwell, please sit." She sat down, smoothing the skirt of her dress, a dress that looked expensive but worn. Up close, I could see the cracks in the porcelain. The fine lines around her eyes were etched with stress. Her hands were manicured, but her cuticles were chewed raw. The man who provides clearly hadn't provided enough to keep time at bay. She said, "Thank you, Mr. Thorne." She hesitated on the name. She didn't recognize me. Why would she? The David she knew wore flannel shirts 3 sizes too big. He had a messy haircut and a perpetual slouch of defeat. The man in front of her wore a 3-piece Italian suit cut to perfection, had a groomed beard, and carried himself with the lethal calmness of a predator. To her, David was a memory of failure. I was a monument of success. I picked up her resume. I didn't make eye contact. I said, "Thorne, impressive background. Vice President of Marketing at Obsidian Corporation. But you left abruptly 6 months ago. Care to explain that gap?" She cleared her throat and said, "Well, the company was downsizing. The culture wasn't a good fit. I'm looking for a place that values vision and loyalty. I've heard Apex Systems rewards those who stick by their principles." I almost laughed. The irony was so thick I could taste it like metal. I repeated, loyalty. That is a core value here. We are a family. We don't cut people loose when things get difficult. We weather the storm. I looked up, locking eyes with her for the first time. Tell me, Vanessa, in your personal life, do you apply that same philosophy? Do you stick by people when the ship is sinking, as they say? She blinked, taken aback. But she was a salesperson. She knew how to pivot. She said, "Absolutely, Mr. Thorne. I believe that support is the foundation of any partnership." In fact, she paused, putting on a brave, tragic face. My own loyalty has been tested. I was married to a man who refused to grow. I supported him for years, paid every bill, sacrificed my own career dreams to fund his hobbies. But eventually, for my own mental health, I had to leave. He was dragging me down into an abyss. My blood ran cold. She was rewriting history in real time. She was selling my trauma as her martyrdom to get a job for me. I leaned forward, the light finally hitting my face fully. I said, "Is that so? He sounds like a terrible burden. A dead weight, perhaps?" Her eyes widened slightly. That phrase, it triggered something in her brain. She whispered, "Yes, exactly." I continued, tapping my finger on the desk. And this man, did he ever try to build something? Project. Maybe some software that he claimed would change everything? Vanessa froze. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. She stared at me, really stared at me, for the first time. She looked at the scar above my left eyebrow, a souvenir from a childhood bike accident she used to kiss. She looked at the color of my eyes. The color drained from her face so fast it looked like a physical blow. Her skin turned a sickly shade of gray. The confident executive melted away, leaving a terrified woman gripping the armrests of her chair. She stammered, "David?" I corrected her, "Mr. Thorne. To my employees. To you, I'm the guy who was jobless. The failure. The loser you left in a rainy apartment with a pile of debt and a broken heart." She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. She said, This is a joke. You can't be. You were broke. You were nothing." I stood up slowly, towering over the desk. I said, "I was building. And while you were chasing men who provide, I became the provider. Apex Systems isn't just a company I work for, Vanessa. I built it. Own it. Every chair, every computer, every client contract. It's all mine. The project you laughed at? It's currently valued at $400 million. She looked around the room as if the walls were closing in on her. Her gaze landed on the Entrepreneur of the Year award. The reality of what she had thrown away was crashing down on her. She started trembling and said, "David, please. You have to understand. I was young. I was scared. I didn't leave because I didn't love you. I left because I wanted you to fight for yourself. It was tough love. And look at you now." She gestured to the office with a desperate, manic smile. "It worked. I motivated you. We were a great team once. We can be again." She took a step toward the desk, reaching out a hand. "I know I hurt you, but I've missed you. That man I left you for, he was a mistake. He was abusive. He lost all his money in bad investments. I've been thinking about you every day." I looked at her hand, the hand that had slammed the door in my face 5 years ago. I said, "You didn't leave for tough love, Vanessa. And you didn't leave for a man who lost his money." I opened a folder on my desk. I pulled out a sheet of paper. I said, "I do background checks on all executive candidates. Extensive ones." I slid the paper across the desk toward her. I said, "You were fired from Obsidian Corp for embezzlement. You didn't leave because of culture. You were caught stealing client funds to pay off gambling debts. Your new man didn't lose his money. He left you because you drained his accounts, just like you tried to drain mine." Her face went from pale to ghostly white. She snatched the paper, reading the report. I said, "You didn't walk into this office for a job. You walked in here looking for a new host, a new victim to leech off of. You thought you could charm a stranger into saving you from the consequences of your own greed." I walked around the desk and stood right in front of her. The smell of her perfume, once so painful, now just smelled cheap and desperate. I said, "But you didn't find a stranger, Vanessa. You found the ghost you created. Vanessa stared at the dossier in her hands, her fingers trembling so violently the paper rattled. She looked up at me, her eyes wet with tears. She choked out, "David, please, you don't understand. I'm in debt. Serious debt. The people I owe, they aren't banks. They're dangerous. I need this job. I need the signing bonus. I have nowhere else to go." She took a step forward, reaching for my hand again. I took a sharp step back, putting the corner of the desk between us. I said, "You have nowhere else to go because you burned every bridge you ever crossed. You speak of danger? The real danger was living with a parasite who drains the life out of everyone she touches. You killed the old David, Vanessa. You drained him until he was a husk. And now you want to feed on the man who rose from his ashes?" She cried out, "I can change. I can be an asset. I know marketing. I can help you expand. Just give me a chance. For old time's sake. For the love we used to have." I pressed the intercom button on my desk. The beep was loud, final. I said, "Sarah, please have security come to my office." Immediately, Vanessa gasped. "Security? David? No. Please don't do this. Imagine what it will look like. I'm a professional." I corrected her, "You are a liability. And at Apex Systems, we mitigate liabilities before they become disasters." 2 minutes later, the heavy oak doors swung open. 2 uniformed guards stepped in. They didn't look at her with pity. They looked at her like she was an intruder. One guard asked, "Mr. Thorne?" I gestured to the door and said Ms. Caldwell was just leaving. "Please escort her to the lobby. Ensure she doesn't stop to speak to anyone on the way out. And revoke her guest pass. She is permanently blacklisted from this building and all Apex subsidiaries." Vanessa looked from the guards to me, her mouth agape. The realization hit her. This was a public execution of her reputation. She hissed, "You can't do this. You petty, vengeful little man. You think your money makes you better than me. You're still just a loser with a computer." I leaned in one last time, my voice barely a whisper. I said, "And you are just a memory I'm deleting." I nodded to the guards. One of them took her arm. She shrieked, "Get off me." She struggled as they marched her toward the door. She looked back over her shoulder, her mascara running down her face in black streaks. David, wait. I'm sorry. Her screams echoed in the hallway for a moment before the heavy doors clicked shut, sealing the silence back inside my office. I stood there for a long time. I walked over to the window and looked down at the street, 40 stories below. About 5 minutes later, I saw a tiny figure emerge from the building's main entrance, flanked by 2 guards. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking lost, small, and insignificant against the towering skyscrapers. Then she walked away, disappearing into the gray swarm of the city. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 5 years. I walked back to my desk, picked up a resume, and dropped it into the shredder. The machine whirred to life, chewing up the lies in the past, turning them into confetti. I sat down and pressed the intercom. "Sarah?" "Yes, Mr. Thorne. Is everything okay?" I said, "Everything is perfect, Sarah. Send in the next candidate. And order everyone lunch today. On me. We have something to celebrate." 12 months later, the charity gala was in full swing. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, competing with the flashbulbs of the paparazzi. I adjusted my tie as I stood on the stage, holding the heavy glass trophy for Philanthropist of the Year. I said into the microphone, "Thank you. This foundation isn't just about technology. It's about second chances. It's about investing in people who have nothing but a vision and the will to survive. Because sometimes hitting rock bottom is the only way to find out who you really are." I looked out into the crowd. I saw my team. I saw Sarah, now the director of operations. I saw my fiancée, Elena, a pediatrician with a heart of gold. She beamed at me, raising her glass. She didn't love me for what I provided. She loved me for who I was. After the speech, as the ballroom buzzed with conversation and music, I stepped out onto the balcony for a breath of fresh air. The city lights glittered below, a sprawling grid of opportunities. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a news alert I had set up a year ago. I unlocked the screen. The headline was from a local crime beat, former marketing executive arrested in multi-state check fraud scheme. There was a mugshot. The woman in the photo looked 20 years older than the one who had walked into my office a year ago. Her hair was matted, her skin sallow, her eyes hollow and dead. Vanessa Caldwell. She had tried to con the wrong loan shark. Now she was facing 10 to 15 years in a federal facility. I looked at the photo, searching for any feeling. Anger, pity, sadness? There was nothing. Just the indifference you feel when you read about a storm that happened in a country you've never visited. The karma wasn't just that she fell. It was that she fell because she refused to climb. She spent her life looking for an elevator while I took the stairs. I deleted the news alert. I blocked the keywords. Elena stepped out onto the balcony, wrapping her arms around my waist from behind. She asked softly, "Everything okay, love?" I turned around, sliding my phone back into my pocket, burying the past forever. I kissed her forehead. I smiled and said, "Yeah, everything is exactly how it's supposed to be." As we walked back inside, the cold wind blew over the balcony, carrying the dust of the city away into the dark, leaving nothing but the light.
All right, which of the 5 stories shocked you the most? Drop the number in the comments right now. Smash subscribe and turn on notifications because every Saturday we drop a brand new 2-hour karma compilation with the wildest revenge stories on YouTube. See you in the next one.